Welcome back, budgeteers. Coach Nino Villa here, disciple of Christ, husband, father, and financial coach. And on today's episode, I'll be addressing 3 questions from members in our Facebook group. Hey there, budgeteers. The new year is here, and you know what that means. It's time for fresh starts and new habits. If one of your goals is to get better with your money, New Money Habits has exactly what you need to kick things off right: the Payday Power Planner. This isn't just any budget tool. The Payday Power Planner is designed to work with your pay periods, not just the calendar month. Why does that matter? Because it helps you to see exactly when your money is coming in and going out. No surprises, no guesswork. With the Payday Power Planner, you'll know if you're working with a surplus or facing a deficit, so you can make informed decisions about your money. It's not just a plan, it's the clarity and control you've been looking for to start the new year strong. Make this the year you finally build new habits for financial freedom. Grab your free Payday Power Planner from New Money Habits today and take the first step toward a better financial future. Visit newmoneyhabits.com now, because this year it's time for a better plan for your money. Our first question comes from Shelby Lynn. She's a rising contributor in the Facebook group. And she has a question about gift giving, especially when she's sending her children off to birthday parties for their peers. So she writes, I have 2 little ones. They are 9 and 12, who often are invited to birthday parties. Typically, I send a $20 bill. Should I be budgeting this in through the year? There is no way I'm sending without a little gift. And so she makes it clear that she's going to send something. And so she's not looking for comments about skip it or just decline, but she's looking for feedback on how to handle gift giving for little ones when her children are invited. And so I wanted to address this question because I think gift giving in general is just something that we need to be reminded of and given a plan of attack for. So when I'm sitting down with clients and we're mapping out a budget for an upcoming month and we're looking at the pay periods, in between those pay periods, we're also looking at what events are coming up. So is there a birthday or an anniversary or some other event that's coming up that requires gift giving? And of course, we do this toward the end of the year as well. But as I have said on previous episodes, I do Christmas in July with my clients. So starting in July, we start planning for gift giving around Christmas and the holidays. But as far as gift giving throughout the year for birthdays, anniversaries, and the alike, when I'm sitting down with the client and we're talking about that, not only are we looking at, do you have any of those coming up this month, this pay period, but prior to any of that, we sit down and talk about, who do you want to buy for? In which situations do you want to buy for? And what do I mean by that? Well, I've shared on the podcast before, but I'll share it again, that I am one of 11. I have 6 brothers, 4 sisters. And when it comes to gift giving for either birthdays or the holidays, we don't buy for everybody. And I don't expect everybody to buy for me either. We're all adults at this point, and so we can all kind of fend for ourselves and buy the things that we want. But the principle here is there are certain people who end up on the gift giving list, and there are other people who don't end up on the gift giving list. And so I encourage my clients to sit down and make a gift giving list. Who ends up on that list? And once you can identify who ends up on that list, now we can start to identify, well, how much am I going to spend on each person before I feel uncomfortable, before I feel like I'm spending too much money. Now, sometimes a particular name might not end up on that list. So in Shelby's case here, where she's asking about her children being invited to their peers' birthday parties, you may want to have a category for children and adults. So when I sit down with clients, here's the process. We first identify who. Who are we willing to buy for? Next, we identify how much are we willing to spend before we feel uncomfortable. Now, sometimes that can be a straight number for adults and a straight number for children. And in a lot of cases, that is the case. So for adults, maybe we spend $50, and for children, maybe we spend $25. And I'm just making those two numbers up because every client is a little bit different. I will start there with each client, and then some are like, well, no, like our budget can handle, and we feel comfortable doing $100 per adult, and we're okay doing $50 per child. It doesn't mean that the child has to be directly half of the adult. You could decide that you're doing $50 per adult and $30 per child. You get to kind of set those limits. But I love sitting down with clients before they need to plan for these types of things to then plan for these types of things, because it takes all the emotion out of it. They're not feeling guilty. They're not feeling compelled to do something just because maybe time is running short and they've procrastinated. Instead, they're thinking through their budget, and they're thinking about, well, what can our budget afford? What can we handle? And what do we want to do in these situations? Now, when you're looking at adults, you might not just have a blanketed $50 or $100 for every single adult. Maybe certain adults you're willing to spend more on. Maybe that is a parent or a specific sibling. Maybe that sibling is just a little bit closer to you, or there's other circumstances. I go back to my own circumstances. I have a sister who lives in town. My sister is very engaged in our kids' lives. So, this particular aunt, who is very involved in our children's lives, receives more gifts than aunts and uncles who are farther away or just are not as involved. And this is not to hurt anybody's feelings. It is not like you're a better sister and a better aunt than the other siblings. It's none of that. It's just proximity. She's more involved. She's closer. So our budget for that particular sibling is going to be different than other adults. But you sit down, you identify who, you identify how much. Then you can kind of determine, is this something that you need to be funding throughout the year? Or is it something that you just plan for in the month and the pay period in which it arises? So specifically for Shelby, let's say, she says she typically sends $20 bill. So let's say you made a budget of $30 total for every child that your children are invited to their birthday. That would allow you to get the card, send a $20 bill, or do something different. But when you lock it in, as you kind of already have in Shelby's case, Shelby, you have already locked it in, $20, then you just know this is what happens. Now, you're going to have to sit down and figure out, how many times are my children going to be invited to birthday parties? And so how much money do I need to be setting aside for that? And that's where some of the skip it or the no might happen, where, you have a 9 and a 12-year-old. These are grade school children, which means they could be in a class with 30 peers, and 30 times 20 is $600, and I don't think you want to be spending $600 throughout the course of the year. And then multiply that by 2. So saying no to some of those invitations, you're certainly not going to be invited to all 30 kids' birthday parties. And so it can kind of get a little sideways. But I think when you're talking in general terms, not just for your children to go to birthday parties, but for any gift giving you're going to do throughout the year, list out the people who you're willing to spend on, list out how much you're willing to spend, and then map those to your different months and your different pay periods. And if it's a large number, if you tally that list up and it's a large number of people and multiplied by however much you're willing to do, then you may want to take something like that and divide it by 12 and fund it a little bit every month. But what you're going to find is, I'm guessing, if your family is anything like my family, or your friends and just your loved ones or anything like mine, I have a lot of August birthdays. 3 of my siblings were born in August, each a week apart. Uh, one of those siblings has their own child who was born in August. So August is kind of a heavy month. And then there's other parts of the year where there's only a single birthday or no birthdays in that month. So I don't really like funding gift giving the same portion every month. But if you must to kind of even things out, then that's okay. If that list is really long and the total amount is uh, just something your budget can't handle, that's when you need to reevaluate. That's when you need to sit down and think about, do I really need to buy gifts for certain people in certain situations? And this goes back to me being one of 11, and I'm not going to buy Christmas gifts and birthday gifts for all of my siblings all of the time. Is there something else? Is there a craft that you can make that you're really good at and that's really meaningful, and so you're gift giving in a different way? So there you have it, Shelby. You're already on the path to how to budget well for gift giving. You have like the set amount of $20 per child. I would just be a little bit more intentional by simply writing down who are you willing to buy for, which may include how many of these kids am I willing to send my child off to their birthday and with a $20 bill in hand. A little bit more intentionality, a little bit more planning, so that you can feel guilt-free when you do it. When you execute the plan that you've already made, you don't have to feel guilty about it. You're probably asking the question because you haven't planned it out just this intentionally yet, and so you're feeling a little bit guilty, but I would say there's no need for that. So you're good to go, and now you have a plan.
Hey there, budgeteers. Good news can only be good news if there's bad news. So, what's the bad news? The bad news is you and I have a deadly disease called sin, and this disease causes us to rebel and disobey God. See, God is holy, righteous, and just, and He cannot be in the presence of sin. So this horrible disease of ours separates us from the God who created us. And the bad news gets worse. There isn't anything you or I can do to make ourselves right with God. We are dead in our sins and on our way to an eternity separated from God. But that's not God's will for us. See, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. God did what only God could do. He made a way for us to be reconciled to Him through Jesus Christ. Jesus came into the world to save sinners like you and me. While we were still sinners, storing up God's anger against us for our rebellion and disobedience, Christ died for us. Jesus took the punishment that you and I deserve and have earned. Jesus is the substitute for your punishment and mine. Now, isn't that some good news? The word gospel means good news. The gospel of Jesus Christ is that you and I broke God's law and Jesus paid the fine. When we place our faith and trust in Jesus, we get to experience God's grace and mercy. Our gratitude should turn us from our rebellious and disobedient sin toward God, seeking after Him and His righteousness. When we do, God gives us a new heart and a new mind. Praise God for His goodness, and remember, God loves, humans sin, Jesus saves.
Next, I want to address Heidi's post. Heidi is a top contributor in our Facebook group, and it is a what would you do kind of moment. So she starts her post off with, what would you do? I have $20,000 in savings and I have $40,000 in debt. This does not include her mortgage. Heidi goes on to identify that the $40,000 in debt is 2 loans, both at about $20,000, both at the same percentage rate. But one payment is $300 a month and the other is $600 a month. She writes, I don't think depleting all of my savings is a good idea. If I pay $10,000 on either one, payment remains the same. Should I pay $5,000 on each, kill one all at once? what would you do? I wanted to address Heidi's question here because it's a common question centered around debt. And I think it's an important reminder that there should be a plan and a process for your debt. So, here at New Money Habits, we teach all three methods of debt elimination. We do not subscribe to just one of the three. We'll teach you the debt snowball, we'll teach you the debt avalanche, and we will teach you the cash flow index. And so, by knowing all three methods, we can start to look at which one might actually benefit you. See, in Heidi's case, it's a little bit different because we're talking only about two debts. And we're talking about two debts that are the same balance and the same interest rate. The only thing that's different is the payment. So if we were doing a traditional debt snowball, we would list these two debts, the smallest one first, the largest one next, and we would start attacking the smallest one until we got it paid off. And then we would roll its payment into the other debt. If we were looking at the debt avalanche, we would list these two debts. We put the highest interest rate first. We would attack that debt, pay that one off, and when we're done, roll the payment into the next debt. And then the cash flow index actually has us look at what is the payment in comparison to the balance. And in this case, because the balances are the same, but the payment, the monthly payment, are different, the calculation of the cash flow index or the CFI would actually be different amongst these two debts. And you want to pay off, if you're using the cash flow index method, you want to pay off the lowest CFI first. So if we took the $20,000 and divided it by the $600 payment, the CFI would be 33. And if we took that same $20,000 and divided it by the $300 payment, the CFI is 66. And so in that case, you want to pay off the one with the smaller CFI because it's going to free up the most of your monthly income. Now, again, because there's only two debts here and they're the same amount, you could have easily gotten there by thinking about, well, if I'm going to pay one of these loans off, do I want to free up $300 a month or do I want to free up $600 a month? And I think it would be really easy for any of us to look at two debts that are the same amount and say, hey, if I can free up to $600 a month, I'm going to pay that first. So that's what cash flow index helps you to identify is with the lower number, when you have, let's say, 10 different debts and you have different balances and different monthly payments, you start dividing all of those numbers to figure out what is the most bang for my buck. But specifically in Heidi's situation, we're talking about two debts. We're talking about $20,000 in savings. We're talking about $40,000 in debt, but she doesn't want to deplete her savings. I've sat down with numerous clients who have been in your situation where they have $20,000 in savings and they have debt. And I've actually encouraged them, like, hey, let's write a check for $19,000 to eliminate one of these debts or get you really close to it. And clients are not comfortable with that. And so, Heidi, I empathize with you're not comfortable doing that. But you go on and you ask, should you pay $5,000 on each? And I wouldn't. Debt elimination is all about focus. And you want to focus on a single debt at a time, eliminating that and getting it out of your life so that you can then turn your attention to the next debt. So I would encourage you to pay the minimums on both and then choose one to pay the extra aggressive amounts on. But here's the other thing. You also mentioned that if you took $10,000 and just threw it at one of these debts, the monthly payment does not change. So what that tells me is that you're talking about installment debt. So either like a car loan, a personal loan, some other type of fixed rate and fixed terms loan here. You're not talking about a credit card, because if you were talking about a credit card, paying it down would also mean that the monthly payment would go down. but you clearly said that that's not the case. So what, if anything, does that change about the advice I just gave? And that is that until you have enough to eliminate the entire debt, depending on the interest rate, you said the interest rate was the same, but you did not disclose the interest rate. So depending on the interest rate, I may actually encourage you to put this money into a high yield savings account if it were going to out earn the percentage that you're paying on the debt. So let me give some specifics. If we were talking about like an auto loan that had a 1.9% interest rate, and since you can earn 4% in a high yield savings account, I would actually encourage you to sock money away into that account until you have enough to then just eliminate the debt. Since that monthly payment isn't going anywhere, you don't really save yourself by parting ways with $10,000 today. So hold on to that $10,000. Let it make some interest for you, especially if it's out earning the interest that you're paying on the debt. And that gets a little bit complicated, but this is where I would want to know more specifically, Heidi, about your situation. What is the interest rate on these debts? How much are you willing to part with? You identified $10,000. Does that mean you really want to retain 10, or are you willing to part with 15 and leave yourself 5? I would want to know more of the specifics of your situation to guide you the best. But generally speaking, I would want to know what the interest rates are, and I may actually advise you to put any additional debt payment you are going to make in the savings account, build that up, and when you have the $20,000 to just pay the loan off and you're comfortable parting with it, then paying off the one with the higher monthly payment, freeing up $600. Now that $600 could be added to the $300, and you could make a minimum monthly payment of $900 against that next debt, while still socking away any additional into the savings to build that up to a point where you can pay it off. And that might sound confusing. You might be thinking to yourself, Nino, why would I save to pay off the first one, but then when I pay the first one off, roll the payment into the other one? Why wouldn't I just put it in the savings? You certainly could. You're already used to parting with the $900 and not really seeing anything of it, but you would know that the principal balance is going down, and so you wouldn't have to save for as long in the savings account to save up enough to pay it off. But that's where it gets complex, and that's where it gets personal. So I feel like I did a little bit of rambling right there at the end, and it got a little complex, but that's because personal finances are personal. They get complex. This is why I sit down with clients and we discuss these things in terms of their own situation to really determine what is going to work out best for them. So I kind of gave some general rules and some general ideas of what I would do, but I would want to get into the specifics. So there you have it. That's what I would do. I would help you to understand all 3 methods of debt elimination. We would identify which one's best for you, and then the execution of that would depend on your situation. So let me say that one more time in a different way. In summary, the principle of debt elimination is very important. The execution of how you go about eliminating that debt is going to be different.
Hey there, budgeteers. It's a brand new year, and that means it's time for new habits, starting with your money. Take charge of your finances in 2025 with New Money Habits Financial Coaching. This isn't your typical financial advice. New Money Habits is all about giving you the knowledge, tools, and support to make confident money moves and build a rock-solid financial foundation. Here's the deal. We're offering a free discovery session to kick off your journey to financial freedom. That's right, no strings attached. In this session, one of our expert coaches will help you to identify your financial goals and create a better plan for your money. We'll help you master your money mindset, sharpen your money management skills, and keep you accountable every step of the way. Make 2025 the year you say goodbye to financial stress and hello to the freedom you've been dreaming about. Schedule your free discovery session today and start creating the new money habits you need to achieve financial freedom.
All right. Last but certainly not least, I wanted to address a post from an anonymous member. This member writes that he or she is an Eagles fan and the Eagles just won the Super Bowl. And he or she has not planned for spontaneous spending on souvenirs or anything like that, but would like to buy a hoodie, a championship hoodie to support their team. Now, further context of this particular post, this Facebook group is a no spend group. So this member is probably already feeling the pressures of, I said I'm not going to spend, and that's why they're posting. But the reason why I wanted to address this post is because it really talks about the need for budgeting, some spending, and some spontaneity into your budget. You have to make room for it. You have to plan for some spending on little things that are just going to kind of keep you motivated and keep you going, because if you deprive yourself of everything, you will burn out. So making some provisions, some margin for you to spend something is important. But the other part of that is I love to sit down with clients and help them plan for spontaneity, which sounds like a completely oxymoronic term. How do you plan for spontaneity? Well, it's very simple. As we're sitting down and we're making your monthly budget and we're looking at your pay periods, each time you get paid, we're going to sock away a little bit of money for you to be spontaneous so that you can do things like buy championship merch to support your team when you want to without feeling guilty about it. See, I go back to we plan for these things to eliminate the stress and the anxiety and the guilt that we start to feel when we start spending in an area that we haven't planned for. The guilt, the shame, and the anxiety comes because you haven't planned for it. The moment you plan for it, the moment it's in your budget, you get rid of the stress and the anxiety and the guilt. Now, when you're making your budget, if your budget simply cannot afford it and then you cram it in there, you're still going to feel just as guilty as you did when you spent it without planning. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is I sit down with clients, and when we're looking at what's the income minus what are the expenses for this pay period, and then we're looking at, are you rocking a surplus or a deficit? And 99% of the time, it's a surplus because we're managing our money well. And most of us have more than enough. It's just when we don't manage it well, it feels like we don't have enough. So I sit down with a client, we look at the pay period, income minus expenses. And if we have a surplus, we start talking about that surplus. What do you want to do with that surplus? Now, before we even get to surplus, though, truthfully, honestly, if spontaneity is already part of their budget, we've already planned for it. And so any surplus we're talking about at that point is truly just surplus. So what does that look like? Well, there's a young lady that I sit down with who has a line item on her budget that says spontaneity or spontaneous. And we fund it. We put like $100 every paycheck into this envelope so that she can spend on things that just kind of pop up. But because it's in her plan, after that $100 is gone and everything else she's planned for, we're still talking about $300, $400, $500, $600, $700 worth of surplus. So she can still eliminate debt, student loan debt. She can still save for long-term travel desires. So it's not as though the $100 that's going into the envelope once every other week, so $200 a month, is not throwing her off of accomplishing these other goals. And so if she deprived herself of that $200 a month just so she can make an extra $200 debt payment, number one, she'd burn out. She'd be able to do that for maybe 6 to 12 months before she just would want to pull her hair out. And that $200 a month doesn't change the timeline on her debt elimination significantly. So I love to look at timelines of debt situations. Like if you have $20,000 worth of credit card debt, let's just say this is not her situation anymore. This is just a different situation. But you have $20,000 worth of credit card debt. An extra $200 a month on top of, let's say we already got you up to like $1,000. All right. So if we got you up to $1,000, you're going to pay that debt off in 20 months. Right. But if you take $20,000 and you divide it by $1,200 a month and you paid it off in 16 and a half months. So you went from 20 months down to about 17. You saved yourself 3 months. But it took you a year and a half to accomplish that. And over the year and a half, you've been driving yourself crazy. You've deprived yourself of everything. You feel like, what's the purpose? This is such a grind. You build in a little bit of a buffer. You build in a little bit of planning to spend on yourself. Yes, I want you to be aggressive on your debt. But if we're already being aggressive at $1,000 a month, is an extra $200 really going to make all that big of a difference on the debt? Or would it make a bigger difference on your motivation to stay motivated? Hey, I didn't have to deprive myself of every last little thing. And I was able to build in a little bit of spontaneity into my budget so that when a friend says, hey, let's go grab a coffee, you don't have to retort, I'm on a budget. I can't afford it. So I wanted to address this post from this anonymous member who wants to buy championship merch and is looking for permission. And I'm saying, give yourself permission. Put it in your budget that you can plan for spontaneity, that you can plan to spend on yourself. Now, make sure it's reasonable. Make sure that you don't invert those numbers where a moment ago I said, hey, we're making $1,000 debt contribution every month and we're holding back $200 for ourselves. I wouldn't invert that. I wouldn't say, hey, spend $1,000 on yourself and throw the extra $200 at debt. But plan for spontaneity. Plan to spend on yourself a little bit within reason. It's all about being reasonable. But the core thing I want you to understand is that when it's part of the plan, you won't feel guilty. You're only feeling guilty and you're asking because it wasn't part of the plan. Make it part of the plan.
That does it for this episode of the New Money Habits Podcast. Remember, if you have any questions, make sure to hit us up on social at New Money Habits and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please consider leaving a 5-star rating and review to help us spread this message of hope to people looking for a better plan for their money.